time. Let's talk about how much I made and lost running an Airbnb out of a vintage 1984 Holiday Rambler travel trailer. So over the past 2.5 years, you guys have watched me purchase, renovate, and rent out a vintage travel trailer as an Airbnb in College Station, Texas. This is in an attempt to create a profitable Airbnb without owning any land. And if you didn't, here's a little bit of a recap. It cost me $4,200 to purchase the trailer, which I found on Facebook Marketplace from Searcy, Arkansas. I rented a truck, went up there, grabbed it, and brought it back down. I spent about 4 months working on it in a field near my house. I outsourced the electrical work and some of the heavy lifting, but the majority of it I did completely myself. This included painting the entire outside, finishing out the inside, and stocking it with everything that the camper needed to be a super cozy tiny home. I also themed it after the local university that I work at, Texas A&M. So it's kind of modeled as a weekend kind of football stay. All of that cost about 10 grand. I rented a spot at a local RV park, dubbed it the Ag Wagon, and started renting it out at the end of December of 2021. The overall plan and vision is not to operate it at an RV park permanently. I was actually hoping after about 6 months, I would be able to find land and put it there, set it up with a cover, insulate the bottom, put a porch on, some cute little hammocks, and make it a real destination glamping retreat stay. I was also pretty financially prepared to invest the money that it would be needed to do that, not even necessarily including a cover for it. It's going to be a big investment. So today we're gonna go over all of the numbers, what I brought in rents, what I sent out in expenses, and I'm gonna tell you kind of the next stage of what's going to happen with the wagon. And I would love for you guys to put in the comments what your guess is right now before we go into it. Do you think I am going to store it until football season? Do you think I am going to move it onto land finally? Do you think I'm going to sell it? Comment your guesses now below to lock them in. Got them in? Great. First, a recap of year one. I had 50 bookings across 83 nights and made $11,139. This is renting it out for usually around $100 a night and doesn't include the cleaning fee that the guest pays, which I pass on to a local cleaner who does that for me at the wagon. There is one time of the year where I can charge significantly more, and that's during football game weekends at Texas A&M, and where I charge $250 a night because that still makes it the cheapest place in Aggieland to stay. Normal rents on football weekends are absolutely astronomical. So total income was $11,139. Unfortunately, total expenses, which included lot rent for the RV park, any maintenance or repairs I had to do, etc., for 2022 ended up being $13,825. Because this was its first year in operation, a few things broke that were fine when I was remodeling that then broke after it had been in use for a while, and $2,000 of that alone was replacing the AC, which is super necessary in Texas heat. There was also an issue during the first year that I now laughingly call Poopocalypse, where the septic system suddenly needed a lot of work. I had to cancel guests. It got fixed, but it was not cheap. The original lock to the camper also needed to be replaced, which was a huge issue, finding a custom replacement lock. It wasn't an easy fix, and that too cost me about $600. There was also an issue during the first months of the camper where we had a really bad freeze and some things busted and needed to be fixed as well. All of these together, I was negative $2,685 for year one. And you can see all of the details and the breakdown in a video below on how much I made and lost in my first year renting a camper on Airbnb. So similar to 2022, 2023, year two started with some things breaking in a winter freeze. I actually had to shut down for over a month to replace a valve on the back of the toilet. And it was because this had to be outsourced to a professional. RV professionals are extremely hard to come by, and they charge up to $300 just to come look at something. The bathroom faucet and shower also busted. I did disconnect the water during this freeze, and I drained all the water out everywhere, but little tiny water particles got stuck in a few places in the bathroom and they exploded. So when we turned the water back on, it sprayed everywhere and I couldn't have guests in. Because the camper's in a park, I can't bottom insulate it to protect it from the temperatures. It makes it more of a permanent structure. So I just have to kind of grin and bear it and deal with it. If I had people in during the freeze, heaters could have run to keep it kind of safe and going and warm enough. But because I didn't book out during the freeze and I wouldn't have wanted to, it was very dangerous. I didn't want to leave heaters running in just a camper sitting there. That's not safe. I also had my own home I was trying to keep warm during like blackouts and freezes. So year 2, January and February were a big old bust. I was negative $942 for January between lot rent, which is $500, and the repairs, and negative $426 in February because after we opened, I only had one guest and they didn't really offset the expenses of just the lot rent. I was back in the black for March after netting about $252 for 5 bookings across 16 nights, so a little over a 50% occupancy rate. So my total income for the month was $1,116, but expenses were about $800 after the $500 lot rent and the cleaning fees. So even on a great month, the margins are pretty slim here. In April, I didn't have many bookings, but I made $562 for the ones that I did have, but I had $653 in expenses, so I was negative $61 for the month. In May, I net a positive $270, but in June and July, where Texas is the hottest and people might not want to stay as much into a tin can, so I was negative $408 and $446 respectively. August was similar, where I was negative $313. Nothing bad happened any of these months. I just didn't have enough guests to offset the basic operating costs. Now in the fall, I was back into the positives because it was football season and I could charge significantly more to stay in the camper for at least a few nights a month. I made over $1,000 a month, 3 months in a row, and netted about $1,000 total. Every single football weekend was booked and I charged $250 a night. Everybody had a great time, but there's really no way that I could charge that much during like normal times. No one would pay that, nor would I want to charge that. In the middle of football season, I did have a small leak that sprung up under the fridge where the water lines essentially took a right turn towards the bathroom. I didn't have to cancel any stays for that, but it cost a couple $100s to fix. And it was just annoying. And then in December again, I didn't have enough bookings. So despite earning $531, I was slightly in the negative again. Overall in 2023, I had 33 bookings for 74 nights, which is fewer guests staying, but they stayed for longer terms and were only a few days short of the 2022 numbers. I made $7,804 in bookings between Airbnb and Vrbo, but expenses cost me $9,637, which means I netted a negative $1,562. That is a lower loss than last year, but alas, still a loss. In my 2022 recap, I said that the main reason for the expenses was the lot rent. And nothing changed about that because I wasn't able to find land or a place to put the ag wagon permanently. Lot rent at the park in 2023 totaled out to $5,899, which was for the parking spot and for electricity, and $5,900 against $9,364 in total expenses. That's 62%. Also, because it's at the park and they have rules based around what's allowed there, I can't cover it. So it's going to have increased sun damage and increased access to water that's falling, which might cause leaks. By dint of it being at an RV park, it's also surrounded by other RVs, which just isn't quite the vibe that I want for the experiential stay that is like the vintage camper. Now, that's nothing against the RV park. It's clean, it's nice, it has a pool, which is a great amenity, and it has some other stuff, but there's some negatives to it too. So lot rent and exposure are my main challenges for the camper, both financially and as far as maintenance. I looked for properties throughout the year constantly, and I actually submitted offers on 3 different properties. Some were mixed use, some were just land, but I didn't win any of those bids, mostly by being outbid. I also didn't just want to buy any old lot and sink tens of thousands of dollars into it, and maybe like the area isn't the best, or like the experience at the camper at that location isn't going to be what I want it to be. We've all stayed in like a shisty area Airbnb. You don't want that if the walls are super thin, especially. I honestly think that location and feeling safe is a huge part of a profitable long-term Airbnb, so I wasn't willing to compromise on that at all. And unfortunately, the places that I would have wanted to put the camper would have cost me more than the lot rent in a monthly mortgage, and I just wasn't willing to invest a crazy amount of money in a lot rent where I knew I wouldn't be able to get the return based on the past 2 years of experience on it. For instance, there was one property that was a decent price, but it was almost completely bordered by this really creepy old cemetery. And while that would have been attracted to a very small niche of people, most people would have been like, I don't like this, which fair. In much more positive news, public-facing metrics make the ag wagon look like a huge success. I've been a super host for the entirety of the past 2 years, and the wagon actually recently got a most loved designation on Airbnb, which only includes the top 2% of their properties by guest review. At the end of 2023, I had a 4.97 total rating on Airbnb with scores of positive reviews from people who absolutely loved staying in the wagon. I had return guests, referred guests, people from really far away, like international, and people from locally. I also really enjoy hosting. It's very rewarding to me. I like being able to add special things for special occasions. I had a couple baby moon at the camper, and I like offering early check-ins and late checkouts, and just being as accommodating as possible to make people's stay as easy as possible. The camper was also featured in Apartment Therapy and a couple of other online publications that touted it as a super cool transformation, which it absolutely was. Also, every guest I had last year and pretty much the year before were awesome. You hear a lot of horror stories from people on YouTube that are like selling Airbnb courses and stuff where they're like, guests trash my place. I didn't have a single person trash my place. All of my guests were super kind. I leave a ton of snacks and amenities, and I have an entire closet or an entire cabinet full of toiletries in case you forget stuff. And when I launched the Airbnb, so many people were like, they're gonna clear you out. Nobody took advantage of it. Like, they used it, but nobody cleared me out. Nobody was disrespectful in any way. I had really wonderful guests. I even left the owner's cabinet unlocked for like the last 6 months and nothing ever happened. Fine. It really brings me a lot of joy to provide like a cool, unique experience for people to stay in, and I love reading people's reviews, seeing their photos online when they tag me, and reading the guest book, which just has so much cool stuff in it. So all of that said, there is work involved in kind of operating an Airbnb. There's a lot of worry involved, especially with something like a camper that's a little different from a normal house stay. There's time that I have to spend booking people, responding to questions, like altering the calendar for certain events, being on hand in case somebody like locks themselves out or has like a sudden issue. Kind of a low grade worry literally anytime someone's in there. And I always have to make sure to have my phone really close at hand because that's how the guests communicate with me. And I refuse to go out of town anytime we had guests in the wagon, because what if all of a sudden something broke and I needed to run out there? It never really happened, but it could have. You get it? So just kind of like a low grade 1% worry in my brain at all times whenever I had guests out there. I will say most issues could be avoided with a little bit of prep. So for instance, the second time somebody locked themselves out, I added an extra key box to the camper and didn't have to run out there again. So shoving year 1 and 2 together, here are the overall numbers thus far. I made $19,000 on bookings, but it cost me $23,000 to essentially run the business in expenses. So I'm net just over $4,000 in the hole after running a business for 2 years. Now, most small businesses don't profit in the first couple of years, and I understand that, but I also think it's kind of a fool's errand to continue doing something in the same way and expect different results. So I sold the camper. I closed out bookings at the end of December of 2023. I listed it for sale on a place called tinyhouselistings.com where they charged me like 1% per qualified lead, and it sold in a week. I actually had backup buyers waiting to purchase it, like cash in hand, ready to bring me the money if the first buyers fell through. This does mean I probably underpriced it. I listed it at $20,000 and that's what I got for it. So let's talk now about the ending numbers for my 2-year short-term rental business. The original setup, including the purchase of the camper, everything in it, all of the work that had to be done before listing it on Airbnb, cost $15,954. My net loss after 2 years was $2,429. Take the sales price of $20,000 and subtract those two numbers from it, and I'm at negative $203. And I'll admit, I didn't run all the final numbers for it until after the sale. I might have tweaked it slightly if I knew it was going to run that close. I also sold the Aggie decor because the new purchasers didn't want it. They brought it up to a different football area of Texas. And so I sold the Aggie decor that I didn't want for $200, which makes our total negative $3. However, a reminder that I am a fan of multiple streams of income in all areas of life, including your business. The Ag Wagon was an experiment that I documented here on YouTube. I made 11 videos, not including this one, of course, and those videos had over 250,000 views. I have the full playlist of those videos below if you would like to go check them out. It includes the purchasing, the renovation, any issues I came up with, and of course running the numbers as the business went active. From those videos alone, I made $6,085. The majority of that profit was from 2 sponsored videos within that series that paid out $4,000. Now, there's also the matter of that anyone who came to my channel for that series probably watched other videos, and it might have contributed to overall income from my channel, but that's not really quantifiable, so we're not going to count any of those numbers. So if you add the $6,081 that I made from documenting the ag wagon on YouTube as profit for the wagon, some people might say that I shouldn't put that money as accounting for this, and instead put it under like the budget girl bucket. And don't worry, for budget and tax purposes, it's absolutely going to be under budget girl and not the wagon. But I did make those videos on this series, and while I would have made other videos otherwise, there's no way to tell how much better or worse those would have done. However you split it, I'm not sure that $3 or even $6,000 would necessarily pay for the time and effort that I put in over the past 2.5 years on the wagon, especially if we counted it out by how many hours I spent, which, don't worry, I didn't track, but it wouldn't be a good return on investment. But there are some non-monetary things that I gained in the past 2 years that can't necessarily be quantified as an ending net profit. For instance, I got a 2-year firsthand crash course in the hospitality and guest services business. I learned a ton about guest relations, customer service that I wouldn't get without working in that business in some other capacity. Considering that I have a day job that I go to every day, that's not really an opportunity that I would have been able to have otherwise. I also learned a ton about short-term rentals and, of course, about fixing things that I wouldn't have been able to learn otherwise. Anytime I take on a big project like the wagon or this duplex, I end up learning a lot of new handy skills. And anytime I can't figure out how to do something, I watch the professional that I hire to do it so that I can hopefully do it next time, especially if it's something that could be done personally. For instance, I know how to use and I own a riveter now. Add that to the resume. These skills that I learned will absolutely help me in future projects like the second duplex that I just bought. A core tenet of who I am involves loving to learn new things and being excited to try and learn new things. So that absolutely contributed to satisfaction of that as well. And I'll say the main thing that I learned is that before jumping into this type of business, you absolutely need land first. And thinking that I'd be able to find land within like a set period of time was almost like kind of wishing the universe to challenge me on that. And they won. I'll give it to them. Believe it or not, I'd actually be up for renovating and operating another camper Airbnb again. I just would need land first. I wouldn't do it again out of an RV park for any period of time, mostly because doing that means that I can't control certain factors that are absolutely integral to the bottom line, like being able to protect the camper in different ways and having to like wait by their rules and be profitable for them. So I don't know whether this was a huge surprise to you guys or not. I think it might have been, but I would love your opinion on what you think about this entire venture and it ending. Do you think that I should have held on and waited longer and kept trying to find land? Do you think I gave up too soon? Or do you think I'm lucky I didn't lose my shirt on this entire endeavor? Do you think I got robbed at the price that I sold it for, or that I robbed the new owners? And finally, are you sad to see the wagon go? I really am. I did actually vlog the entire experience of selling it, and I'll admit in that video I cry several times. So that will be coming out soonish. I would also be up for doing a video on answering any questions that you guys have about this entire process of operating, renovating, shutting down an Airbnb. If all else fails, if you've been here a minute, you know that I am a transparency queen and an open book. Go ham, ask me anything you'd like down in the comments, and I will answer them. Thank you guys for watching this video. This month has been absolutely crazy. You may have seen that Jacob and I actually got engaged at the very end of December. I bought another duplex, so I've got videos coming out on that as well, if not already, depending on where this falls in the editing lineup. And I can't wait to share all of the details about that with you. But that, selling the wagon, some really terrible weather here in Texas, and my day job have all contributed to a big delay in my video production that I didn't plan or like. I am trying to catch up a bit now, and I promise you I've got some really exciting things coming that I think you're gonna love. So I will see you guys in the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I can't wait to read your comments down in the section.